In order to understand what chroma key, better known as green screen, really is, we have to look back to its origins in the early days of filmmaking. In his 1898 film, Four Heads Are Better Than One, French film director Georges Méliès developed a technique to remove his head, which would become the first example of what we now know as green screening, or in this more general sense, compositing. His technique consisted in covering over certain areas of the frame so that the film underneath would not be exposed. This was called the matte. Then the film would be round, and everything except for the matte would be covered over. This special double exposure allowed him to combine or composite two images into one. This idea of compositing is the idea that over the next 100 years would evolve into what we now know as modern-day chroma key technology. But what exactly is green screen? How does it work? I mean, it looks pretty simple, right? You just take the background, and wherever there's green, you put the picture. Well, not really. It's a bit more complicated. First, you take your background footage. Oh, maybe I should have mentioned earlier, but the green screen doesn't have to be green. Actually, it can be almost any color. Green is usually used because not many people wear green, because it's very different from the human skin tone, it's easy to light, and because modern camera sensors pick up green light very easily. You could also use a red background, for example, but you would run into problems not only if you were wearing a red shirt, but because the color red is actually quite close to the human skin tone. Once we have our background color selected, the system measures the similarity, or the distance, between the color you've selected and each pixel in the frame. The close colors are considered part of the background, or matte. The far ones are part of the foreground. Having identified the background in the foreground, the system removes all of the background, leaving us with our foreground image. It then uses that data to create the background keying signal. This is simply an image matrix where the ones represent white and the zeros represent black. Then, using a complex series of mathematical operations now shown on your screen, the system multiplies this matrix by the background image, giving us our suppressed background. The system then combines the background and foreground parts, giving us our final green screened image. Chroma key technology is extremely widespread in modern digital media, and is not only found in the latest blockbusters, but also in much of the media that we consume on a daily basis. Here is a perfect example.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Markling, Channel 3 News. Let's take a look at this week's weather. Here we have 14 degrees, partially sunny in Lisbon, and 15 degrees with rain in Madrid. Let's zoom into our home city, San Sebastian, and see what the weather's going to be like this week. Here we have the 5-day forecast, which are 5 glorious days. I think we have a technical problem. Can you change the city? I think that's not San Sebastian. Thanks. Here we go. We have five glorious days of rain.
Chroma key is also often used for special effects.
Oh, hey, have you seen my head?
For instance, removing a body part, or making yourself invisible.
Oh shit, Voldemort!
As you may have noticed, we decided to fully explore green screen technology by making a few films ourselves. We learned a lot in the process, especially about the limits that the theory behind the technology put on its functionality. For example, if you have a lot of highlights and shadows on your background, this converts to large differences or distances between colors on your background. This can cause close colors from the background to be confused with far colors from the foreground, or vice versa. This is exactly what has happened in this example here.
Have you seen my body somewhere here? I think I lost it, and I can't find it.
Note the shadows and highlights on the original footage. We also learned that since differences in colors, the only way that chroma key has of distinguishing the background from the foreground, if you wear a blue tie on a blue background, you're going to look pretty stupid.
Thank you very much. That's the weather for today. Oh, you like my tie? Yeah, I know, it's great. My wife gave it to me for my birthday.
And finally, it's worth it being said that all this was put together on professional video editing software, whose algorithms will be a bit more advanced than the one we've explained today. A video made with our algorithm would probably look something like this.